Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. So for those of you watching in the future, if you don't know me, my name's Kristi. My sister Alex is joining me to talk about mental health tonight. And this is something that I have been over the past 7 or 8 years, probably, I've been very open about for myself and my own journey. Just recently, actually, I've been having Facebook memories pop up from like 7 or 8 years ago when I started sharing and yeah, opening up about that for myself. So it's fitting maybe that we decided to have this chat tonight. So Alex and I are really, really close. We share pretty much everything with each other, but she's ready to open up a little bit herself about her own journey with, she struggles and has struggled more with anxiety, whereas I've been more on the kind of depression side of things. So we kind of have two sides of that coin. So before we get started, just a little disclaimer, neither of us are experts on anything. I have gone through the journey of depression, and I've really kind of come out the thick of that. I've done a lot of healing work on myself. We're just literally normal women who experience these types of things. And I believe, and I know Alex believes as well, that it's important to talk about these things. And I'm going to get into this in a little bit here. But one of the reasons I believe that is because throughout most of my journey, all of it actually, I felt very alone, like I didn't have anyone to talk to, couldn't relate to anyone. So that's why I started opening up, is so that if even one person could read or hear or see the things that I was going through, then maybe they would feel a little bit less alone. So that's just my little disclaimer that, yeah, we're not experts, we're not therapists, we're not anything like that. We're just here to share and chat and talk about our experiences. And you are welcome to donate at the end if you find value from our conversation, but absolutely no pressure to do any of that. I just always open that up because I know sometimes people like to just show gratitude or appreciation in that way. So that being said, let's dive in. So for those of you who don't know, I know lots of you who are watching or will watch in the future, if you know me like relatively personally, or if you've been following me on social media for quite a while, you've heard my story, you've heard me talk about this. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm going to share just a little bit of my experience and kind of the things that I have gone through and what this has looked like for me. So to give a little bit of just kind of a short history or background of myself, very normal childhood. And when I was a teenager, I ended up in a relationship that was a little bit physically abusive, but very emotionally and mentally and verbally abusive. And I personally believe that a couple years into that is when my depression started. I really just lost myself, as people kind of say, but really when you're in your teens, you haven't really figured out who you are anyway. And so that eventually ended. My grandma passed away when I was 20. I was very, very close to her. That was a hard thing for me. I became a single mom in that same year. So that was an adventure. And then, of course, I got into postpartum depression and that escalated. And then I ended up in I entered into a relationship a few years later that was very toxic and very just not great. And it all kind of eventually came to a head when I still remember it so vividly. I was laying in bed one night and I was just wondering like what was in the house, like if I had enough pills of any type that I could swallow and just not wake up. And so I feel like my experience is a little bit different than other people's with depression in that I was never, I don't identify as ever being like suicidal, but for me, it was more the feeling of like life stretching out before me just was unbearable. Like I just didn't really have any excitement or joy to be alive and to get up out of bed every morning. And it was just like, I just felt so dreadful that I was so young. I was in my 20s at that point, and I still had 60 or 70 or hopefully however many years left to live. And so that alone was very draining. Or, I'd think, gee, maybe I'll just become like a drug addict and then I'll just waste away and then I'll just die eventually. And really the only thing, well, I shouldn't say that. The biggest thing that stopped me from doing that was my son. And he was very, very young at the time. He was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And so, that was kind of the tipping point for me. And I started trying some different things to start to help myself feel better. At that time, I was a little bit snobby about medication, and I personally, it just wasn't something that I wouldn't say I believed in it, but I was pretty against it at that point in my life. And that was just my own personal, point of view. That wasn't something that I was willing to try at that point. So I tried a couple of different counselors or therapists, didn't really vibe with that. Tried something called brain training, and that didn't really make too much of a difference. And then I got into trying something called body talk. So that's like a natural healing modality. And that actually really started to help pull me out of how I had been feeling for so long. And I would notice I would be in a good mood for no reason and just feeling really good. And I'd be smiling and laughing and actually just feeling happy. And that was such a foreign feeling to me at that point that's how I knew that this was working. Natural modalities, I'll say right now, don't work for everyone, or if that's something that you don't personally believe in or whatever, that's fine. That's just what worked for me. So we'll talk a little bit about this later too, but you have to find what works for you, right? So things really just snowballed from there. I ended up getting my body talk practitioner certificate, and then I got into other natural healing modalities, and things were going really good. I ended the relationship that I was in. I stayed single for a little while just to kind of work on myself, because I had been so terrified of being alone, and I didn't want to be lonely. That that was a whole other thing, a story for another day, I guess. And then I met my partner, who I'm still with now 6 years later. And a couple years ago, about 2.5 years ago now, I had another kind of stretch where I was feeling really, really terrible. And it was back to the point again where I was sitting on the couch one day, and I just remember feeling what a relief it would be to just not be alive anymore. And again, it's not this feeling or this thing of I want to kill myself, or even that I want to die. It's just, I feel no joy or happiness at being alive. So we'll talk a little bit later about how I kind of pulled myself out of that. And so again, then I felt like I had reverted back to where I was almost. And my mom actually reached out and said, hey, if you want help, or, Dad and I will help get you into counseling or whatever you need. And so I was seeing a counselor for a little bit then. And then things started getting better, and I started taking more action to get myself out of that. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what my story was. And I do want to dive a little bit into the details later of kind of what I struggled with most and that type of thing. So I'm going to give the stage or the microphone to Alex and just share whatever you feel comfortable with about your own journey, whether it's anxiety, stuff that you're struggling with right now, whatever you do want to talk about, whatever you don't, go for it.
Okay, so I don't know if there's anybody else in here, but I think anybody who's in here knows who I am. If you don't, I'm Alex. I'm Kristi's sister. I have a lot written down because I tend to go off track and mumble. So if I'm looking down, it's because I'm reading my notes. So Yeah, I've struggled with anxiety and social anxiety for pretty much as long as I can remember. I've suffered years of back pain, like shoulder pain, lower back pain, just because I hold on to a lot of my anxiety and stress in my body. That's caused me a lot of pain. Um, I would say my social anxiety is probably the worst. I've actually lost a lot of friendships, a lot of relationships, because I let it get the best of me. And if there's a situation that I'm not 100% comfortable with, I'll usually cancel plans or I'll bail last minute, which obviously hurts a lot of people. So yeah, that can be really hard. Like people, they take it personally, they think it's because you don't want to be friends with them. You don't want to, like relationships I've been in, like I was too scared to meet their friends just because like when you have social anxiety, you always think the worst, right? Like you think, well, people are going to think I'm awkward, or people are going to think I'm weird, or the biggest thing is you think people don't like you. Like you just automatically assume, well, people are going to hate me. So I've lost relationships, friendships. I don't know. I think it's something that a lot of people deal with, but people don't really want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable and it's embarrassing, I guess. I don't know. And yeah, it's pretty much it. Like I wish I don't really have anyone in my life. I don't think that maybe they do and they just don't tell me, but when you don't really have anyone in your life who can relate or understand, it can be really hard because you just feel alone in it. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, 100%. And I personally I struggle with a little bit of like social anxiety, but I know there are people, such as yourself who struggle just with that anxiety, like oftentimes on like a daily basis. And
Mhm.
just from what I have seen other people share and talk about, I feel like it can be so understandable that maybe you don't want to share, you hold back from sharing or opening up or asking for help, because anxiety essentially is rooted in like fear, right? If you dig down to kind of what's underneath it, it's a lot of fear. So maybe it's hard to open up, or it's hard to talk about it for that fear of maybe feeling like you're going to be a burden on someone, or
Mhm.
feeling like I know, for example, when I was really struggling with depression, one of my biggest things that I did for so long is I invalidated myself and what I was feeling and what I was going through. And I had
Mhm.
this story in my head of, there are so many people who have things so much worse than I do. So why should I like open up and talk about this? And like I'm just being a baby, maybe I'm overreacting, right? We like
Mhm.
get in our heads and we tell ourselves these stories. And I think that it can be similar, having anxiety too, is that as I feel like depression, anxiety kind of go hand in hand, but they're also very, very different as well. Like I
Mhm.
feel like anxiety, I almost feel like some people, I won't generalize it into the category of everyone, but some people have like high functioning anxiety where they can put this like mask on and go about their day and kind of make like everything feels okay, where on the inside they're just kind of like freaking out, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, do you resonate with
Well,
that for yourself?
yeah, I feel like I can put on a pretty good face and like pretend like nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think too, like a fear of talking about it for me is I don't want a lot of people to know, because then I feel like it's more obvious. Like if you point out, oh, I'm socially awkward, I have social anxiety, people are gonna like see that, right? Then they're gonna notice it.
Yeah. And
Whereas
then
if
maybe
you can just Whereas if you can just kind of pretend like I'm good,
yeah.
people don't, they're not gonna just focus on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
possibly.
I've managed to, you know, do my best with managing it. And
Yeah.
I don't know, but some days like it comes in waves, right? Some days it's so bad that like I think I texted you about this. The one day I was shopping in Estevan and it just hit me out of nowhere, and it was like I was just in such a big panic going into stores, and I'm like, I don't want anybody to look at me. I don't want any
Yeah.
like, and especially for me, it's if I'm in public or like if I see somebody I know, and like it, like even family, it doesn't like it doesn't matter who it is. If I saw someone I knew in Walmart, I would literally bolt the complete opposite direction. And I know like Kyle always like my boyfriend always makes fun of me for it because he's like,
it's okay.
like that's your family, you're not gonna go talk to them. And I'm like, I just can't. That's one thing with social anxiety is like you can't do small talk and just
Yeah.
I would rather talk about something like this, or something that I can actually relate to and something that actually matters to me, other than like, oh yeah, well the weather's good today, or like I don't care about that
Yeah,
stuff.
100%. I'm
That
on
may
that
sound
page
really
too.
ignorant, but
No,
mhm.
I feel the exact same. And for me personally, I just think as an introvert, as somebody who also is so sensitive to like energies and that type of thing, I I'm not in life for like the little small talk conversations. Like that's really what I struggle with. Did we freeze?
Mhm.
Is it okay now?
I am so yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
and I think the thing is like that's part of life, right? You have to do that, especially with my job. When when people come in, you have to do small talk. And that makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
part of life, so you
Yeah.
have to do it.
Yeah. 100%.
Mom, I know you can relate to that too, right? Like I
Yeah,
know you don't like
we talked about it the other day where um right from my very first job dealing with the public and putting on a mask, and you're a totally different persona
mhm,
for that whole time, and you come home, and then it's carried on to my other jobs where I absolutely was terrified to answer the phone or talk to people, or yeah, it's taken me a lot of years. I still have to put on that persona most days. Um, and I think that's partly why I do get so tired when I come home, and I just need quiet and alone, and just time to become myself again instead of
mhm.
being that person all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's draining. And I know social situations just drain me because you're not I'm not saying this is how it is every time, but a lot of the time you're putting on a face, right? You're you're not being your true self, and that's just exhausting. Like
Yeah.
if I have to be away for a weekend with someone, or like, I don't want to say anybody in particular, but like if I come home on a Sunday after, I'm sure you guys probably all know, but I literally just have to be in bed pretty much all day, and like that's really hard because I think like my boyfriend takes it really serious, like he takes it personally, right? He thinks, well, she doesn't want to hang out with me, like she doesn't want to talk to me, like what did I do to make her upset? And it's like that's not it. It's like a battery that needs to recharge after being around people. And yeah, you're right, like being an introvert, it's literally exhausting.
Yeah. And
And
like
I feel
that's
like
literally,
it's so tiring.
yeah. And like that's literally for me anyways, 80% of being an introvert is going and being in social situations like that and outputting all of that energy and having to make that conversation. It really drains your energy. And so when I was at
Mhm.
my previous job, I was working as a front desk agent at a hotel, and as an introvert, having to pose as an extrovert for 8 hours a day. That's what got me to that point in 2019 of being so depressed again, is because I was having to do that, and it was draining me and it was exhausting me. And it was just so out of alignment for who I am as a person that it really just kind of threw me off track with my own mental health. And I was lucky enough to be able to switch positions at that job, but it still was a pretty toxic workplace, and I got really wrapped up in the drama and just all of the stuff that was going on. And that's not really the type of energy and things that I want to be interacting with either. So yeah, definitely, like we put these masks on. And Mom, how you were saying about, getting anxious about having to like answer the phone and stuff like that. I personally, now I like my nervous system, even when I get like a text message, like kicks into like fight or flight, where I'm like, okay, what bad news is this going to be? Or like, what's going to be, someone's, going to be giving or venting or like whatever, which I generally don't mind that. But, anytime my phone rings, I like get into a panic. And so
You don't even answer your phone.
No, I don't answer my phone unless it's somebody I know. I will not answer my phone. I saw a meme that came up on my memories the other day, and it was like me in 2005, assigning a special ringtone for every contact in my phone. Me in 2019 or whatever it is, putting my phone on silent and never answering it. Like, yeah, that's literally me.
Yeah.
But I the nervous system, I'll try not to get into that too much tonight, but it really is such an important topic in connection with mental health, because when you are depressed or you're dealing with anxiety, your nervous system is always in this state of like, honestly, even if you don't identify as struggling with those things, just really the way our society and our day-to-day is now, there's so much like constant stress, and there's always social media stuff to be looking at, and there's always news to be looking at, especially right now, right? If you're watching this, like if you have me watching this years and years into the future, we're still in the midst of COVID times. And so the world is crazy, it's chaotic. Literally everyone's nervous system is always in fight or flight. So when that happens, your body is literally always on edge. You can't ever, like, your nervous system never comes into rest mode. So it's so important to be proactive about your mental health and about just your wellness in general. And you have to be, I get stern always when I talk about this, but you have to be doing things to take care of yourself, and however that resonates for you, right? Whatever feels good for you. So for some people, maybe it's going to the gym, or it's exercising or working out. For some people, it's yoga. For me, it's meditation and journaling. Or watching The Office, like that's my comfort show. That brings my nervous system out of fight or flight into a rest mode. You have to find what works for you, and you have to be proactive and practicing those things on a consistent and daily basis. Of course, this is just my opinion. I'm just one person, right? But if we all took better care of our nervous systems and our well-being on physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic levels, right? Because all of those things make us up as a whole. Imagine, I can even feel the energy of it right now. Imagine how much more calm the world would be if so many of us weren't always in this, like Alex, even you and I, I really try to stay out of the COVID stuff, the vaccine conversations. I've really cracked down on myself with not looking at any of that stuff. And I try to just stay educated about what's going on, but at the very bare minimum, and like we'll rant about that and have our vent sessions about that. But, I've noticed for myself that it is possible to cultivate and tap into calm, which honestly, I feel like for so many people seems like it's just not even a possibility right now because there's so much chaos, there's so much panic and fear, and there's so much this side versus that side, and just all this stuff that's going on.
Yeah,
So,
and
consider
like,
your dad yesterday morning came out here and told me something about COVID that he had just read, and I burst out crying. Obviously, you guys know me, that doesn't happen very often, but
exactly.
I'd had it, and he
Yeah.
looked at me, "Are you okay?" I said, I no,
Yeah.
I'm
And I
not.
think, I think that's the point that so many people are at right now is just, I think so many of us are just done. And yeah, we're always in this, like, even if we're not aware of it or we're not showing it on the surface, we're always in this state of like such high, like our emotions are just like so high running right now that it's just like, yeah, like at the drop of a hat, you'll yeah, burst out crying. And it's like, oh, okay. So I
yeah,
guess that's that then. But you
yeah,
know, and that's a perfect example, right? Of I do want to get in a little bit to talking about emotional suppression in connection with mental health. And yeah, so yeah, that's a perfect example of that. Okay. So let's shift before we jump too far ahead. I want to talk a little bit about the things that I have used for myself to essentially, I don't like phrasing it as healed my depression, but to get out of that for myself where I am like feeling good and joyful in everyday life. So again, this is just what has worked for me because I've worked primarily just with like natural healing modalities and journaling and meditation and more of the things that I think is not like quote unquote mainstream. 100%, if you feel like you require medication to help you, go for it. Therapy, go for it. Or like whatever. Again, I'm gonna probably say this 1,000 times. You have to find what resonates for you. Like, what do you feel is right for you at any given time, and trust that intuition, like trust that gut feeling, right? So back in 2019, when I kind of had my backslide back into depression, I did start with a few counseling sessions. And what came up, and I know I've talked with you guys about this probably at that time, was daddy issues, quote unquote. And I remember just being so upset at that time because I felt like that was just such a like a cliche, like, you know, women just having those types of issues. And so, whatever, that was fine. In the fall of 2019, I ended up quitting my job. And when 2020 began, I really threw myself into my own healing. I had received a couple of different like readings or sessions from an energy worker, or whatever you want to call her. And that really prompted me into digging into a lot of like inner child stuff and healing on that level, getting into like my core wounds. So having like do have a father wound, but a self-worth wound, poverty consciousness wound. And there was one more wound of like not being seen. So I was lucky enough to be able to take the time, like the full time, quote unquote, to do that. And that was my 2020. That's what I focused on. That's what I worked on for myself. And I resisted for a long time, even something like inner child work, because I went through life. Childhood was great. All my, you know, my needs were met and all this stuff. But there was actually a lot there. And here's the thing, we all have a lot of stuff from our childhoods that we could, you know, go back and take a look at and heal at that level, because the things that we learn, come from our parents, and the things they learned come from their parents, right? And that the beliefs and the thoughts and all that stuff just gets passed down. It's natural, right? Until someone stops and takes a look at it and says, no, like this pattern is done. Like, we're not going to do this anymore. So I'm what people, light workers or energy workers, call a cycle breaker. Alex, you're a cycle breaker too. So we have done a lot of work just to become more conscious and aware of where we have been functioning from. So what I mean by that is, what are your beliefs? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What do you feel your limitations are? Right? Like, what are your wounds? Because when you can identify those things, you create this awareness of, okay, this is where I've been functioning from. These are the things that I really don't feel are like in alignment with me. I don't like, these just aren't working for me. And then from that place of awareness, you can start to create that change. And it's hard work. It's heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching work. But it's very, very worth it. So that's really how I have come to this space of not having a day of feeling depressed in over 2 years, for someone who struggled with depression for like 10 plus years. And I will say this though, for myself, I now have a greater awareness and a larger space of consciousness of, because I've worked so deeply with energy and I understand energy now and how that applies to us as a human being, I understand that for me personally, the days of depression that I do have, I don't view it as depression anymore. I view it as, okay, there's things going on that are stressing me out, that trigger, it's like a domino effect where then you're having days where I don't really want to get out of bed, or it's like doom and gloom, right? So for me, that's kind of what I have done. I know that's not like super detailed. I don't have like a list of tools to give you, but I always recommend, I'll give you one tool. Journal your little heart out, because when you do that, you are emptying your mind of the thoughts or the anxieties or the fears or the like whatever that monkey mind has going on, that is just over and over and over. And as you empty that out, you start to create space within yourself where you'll start to feel even just a minuscule little bit lighter. And then you'll start to notice that you're feeling lighter. And if you have trouble with journaling, I recommend something called morning pages, where you sit down in the morning and you just journal out 3 pages is what the recommendation is. But sometimes I do 1 page, sometimes I do 2 pages. But it's just sit down and it's just a stream of consciousness. So I've even had days when I first started that where I would sit down and start writing and I'm like, okay, I don't know what to write. And I would just write. I don't know what to write. I don't have anything to say, right? And it's just starting to get that flow going. And some of my biggest healing moments this past year in 2021 have come about from morning pages. So journaling is really my personal number 1 recommendation. I know I've told my mom to journal like probably 500 times. I know she doesn't, but that's okay. That's why I say you have to find what works for you, because I know that not everyone resonates with journaling. I know that some people, they just really, really struggle with it. They can't get into it. That's fine. Right? Find what feels good for you. Maybe it's just like 5 minutes of stretching just with some music in your ears. But, start to find those little things and start to do them for yourself. So, Alex, what do you find helps you? Because I know you've done a lot of work in the past like year or so as well, in terms of, self-healing. But what do you find helps when you're having those tough days or moments or maybe weeks or even months of anxiety? Like, what tools do you kind of turn to when you're experiencing those tough moments?
A lot of what you said, journaling helps a lot. I haven't been journaling lately. A lot of the time I feel like I sit down with the best intentions to journal, and then I put too much pressure on myself that I need to,
Have an
I need to have
epiphany.
have big shifts, just because in the past, a lot of the time with journaling, that is how it's gone, is I've had a lot of really deep realizations and a lot of really great healing moments from it. So I think I put a lot of pressure on myself that it needs to be like this big thing, when really it can just be like, hey, this person was bothering
Stressing
me
me out.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, journaling helps. I like to stretch. Stretching helps a lot. Going for a walk, taking a bath, like just all of those things, where you can kind of like, I know for me, going for a walk helps a lot because I'm not on my phone, right? Like it's just a time when you can't just be scrolling on social media when you're going for a walk. I mean, you could, but so I think that's a really good healing for me. Yeah, that's, I don't know. I could think of a lot of things. There's a lot of tools that you can use.
The thing is to actually use them, right?
Yeah, and like saying that, I know what's going to help me feel better, right? Like we know these things, but it's just to actually do them and put them into play. Like,
Yeah.
I find it really hard to pull myself out of it some days. And I think it's also really important to know that you don't always have to do something to make yourself feel better. Like if you want to have a day and just stay in bed all day, I think you should allow yourself to do that. If you just need to cry it out, just cry it out, right? Not everything always needs to be perfect and happy and bright. Like, I think it's really important to feel those dark moments too, and do what you can to help yourself. But I do think that's really important too.
Yeah, 100%. And that actually leads me into something else I wanted to talk about tonight, which is emotional suppression. And this is something that I think that we are just naturally taught from like toddler age. As parents, we want to soothe our children when they're upset or when they're crying, and that's a natural thing. But what I've learned from my own work and just from other people's works and just reading and researching and learning about different things is that it teaches us this innate way of thinking that tells us it's not okay to cry, or it's not okay to be upset, or it's not right. We internalize that and we tell ourselves then, okay, I'm feeling angry, but this is a bad emotion to feel. So I'm going to just turn away from that and I'm going to try to just feel happy. So this starts at a very young age. And it's just natural. I see a lot more now in the generation now where people have kids. I'm seeing a lot more of parents teaching kids how to just sit with their emotions, how to vocalize, how to identify their emotions and talk and say how they're feeling. And that's a really awesome thing to see, I think, because they are raising this younger generation to be emotionally intelligent. And what I mean by that is to be able to regulate their own emotions and to be able to sit with the tough emotions and not make themselves wrong for feeling that way. Right. So can you guys still hear me? Okay. Sorry, you're just freezing, but as long as you can still hear me. It says my internet connection is unstable.
You're frozen right now. It's like when you move around, I think that it freezes, but
Okay, you can hear me now though.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're
we
just
can
still,
hear you.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So back to my train of thought. Yes, so we grow up and we don't know how to sit with those uncomfortable or those more kind of difficult emotions, or those emotions that we might label as wrong or bad. So such as anger, frustration, resentment, guilt, grief, sadness, right? Those types of emotions kind of on that end of the scale of things. And it doesn't feel good to sit with those emotions. It doesn't feel good to feel jealous or to feel guilty, or it doesn't even feel good to feel sad most of the time, right? So no wonder, I mean, we don't really want to sit with those things. But what happens is when we're in this subconscious thing of thinking, okay, to feel angry is wrong or bad. I shouldn't feel that way. So I'm going to ignore that emotion, or I'm going to pretend it's not there, or I'm going to, good vibes only, away from that. That's called spiritual bypassing. When you are I was so big into the whole good vibes only thing a few years ago. I really, really was. Like it was my thing. I'm ashamed, kind of embarrassed to say that now, but I have learned a lot more since then. So when we ignore those tough or uncomfortable emotions, we are suppressing those emotions by not allowing ourselves to just feel our way through them and then letting them release. And when we suppress those, what do you think happens? They build up layer after layer after layer within you. So how this works is there's these different kind of layers to ourselves as a human, right? So there's energetic, spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. So physical is the most dense. Physical is our body, but we all know that we have emotions and we have mental health, and everything all works in connection with everything else. So when you are suppressing those emotions and those things that you can't see, those things that aren't physical necessarily, right? They're not tangible. Like you can't hold or physically feel an emotion, but you can physically feel an emotion in your body, right? If you're feeling anxiety, where do you feel it in your body? If you're feeling anger, if you're feeling guilt, if you're feeling heartbreak, you can feel those in your body. So what happens as you suppress those, they build up more and more and more until they manifest or they show up physically in the body. So Alex, you talked about back pain, shoulder pain, right? So there's likely years and years and years of emotional suppression that has built up within your body that's causing that physical pressure now and that pain.
Yeah.
So when we're not allowing ourselves to feel the whole spectrum of human emotion, not only are we suppressing and then causing ourselves pain eventually on the physical level, we're not allowing ourselves to experience ourselves as humans as a whole, because the experience of being a human includes those emotions that are difficult and uncomfortable to sit with. It's part of living as a human on earth. It just is. We're all going to feel those things. So if you're ignoring those things, if you're trying to shove them down, if you're trying to suppress them, you're denying part of your whole self. So that's really what that boils down to. And so then also when you're doing that,
Yeah.
you're pushing all of that down, but eventually it's going to start overflowing, and you're going to start bursting into tears when someone mentions something about COVID in passing. Right, Mom?
Well, you have turned this all on me.
I didn't mean to, but
Because you know
it's
that's
just,
what I do.
I know, and it's a good example. I'm not trying to call you out or anything. It's just that was actually a good example of, if you're not allowing yourself to, number one, feel your feelings, and then number two, find a way to consistently release those emotions. So through journaling, through like working out or exercising, going for a walk, that physical movement is a good way to get those emotions out as well. Again, find what works for you. But if you're not allowing that process of like releasing in one way or another, then it starts to bubble up over the surface. So this is just something for everyone to think about and to consider. So are you in this, like, it's not a rut, but it's a habit, it's a pattern of not talking about your emotions or journaling them out or releasing them in some way. And I know that this can be hard. I personally am really not great at speaking about my emotions and how I'm feeling, specifically with my partner. I'm not a good communicator. I can sit here and talk all day to like strangers or share myself online. This is an area that I am personally trying to put some conscious work into. I've been like this for a long time. My old partner, we would get into fights and then just not talk to each other for like 5 days, and then just like, we would never talk about it. It would just be like, okay, well, whatever. So that's not the healthiest habit to be in, but it is one that I have. I think that there's always little ways that you can try to become more conscious of yourself and your habits, and again, just where you're functioning from. So to apply that to mental health, I think one of the biggest things is you just have to be, first of all, really radically honest with yourself about what you're going through and how you're feeling. So whether it's depression, anxiety, whether it's maybe something more quote unquote severe than that, you're the one who has to admit to yourself before you're going to really be willing to kind of make any change. Alex, does that resonate for you?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I know within the last year, just with all the work that I've done, like, I had to admit a lot of really tough things. Like, it's really hard, and I think that's why a lot of people they just are stuck, and probably will be for their whole lives, because they're not willing to take a look at their shit, right? They're not willing to do the work, do the healing, because they're scared, right? Like, they think, oh, my life's fine. And I mean, to each their own, but you think everything's fine, and if I open this can of worms, like, it's just it. And like, from experience, I know it can be so much, and it's like, oh, all this stuff is being brought to the surface that you weren't even aware of, and now I have to deal with it, right? Where it's like, if it's not there, you don't have to deal with it. But the thing that people don't understand is, things are never going to get better for you if you don't do the work.
Something,
Like,
anything. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, it doesn't have to be like what you and I have done. It doesn't have to be deep healing. But I mean, I know I always tell people, go for therapy, right? I know a lot of people won't resonate with that, but that's something that I really stand for. Is, I think everybody could go to therapy. I think everybody could benefit from it. I think a lot of people could benefit from it more because they don't like have the awareness that, say, you and I do, right? Like, we've done a lot of work to be aware of our issues, and I think a lot of people need help with that, right? Like, I have gone for therapy. I don't really resonate as much with it anymore, just because I know my shit, right? Like, I know my issues. I can admit to myself what my problems are. It's just, I think a lot of people do need help with that, right? Like, a lot of people just don't even know what their issues are, right?
Yeah. And
They
I
just
think,
live in denial or whatever.
yeah. And I think a lot of people, you know, maybe just don't really know where to start. Like maybe they just, they know what's going on with them, or they can identify what's going on to a certain point. It's like, okay, oof, I've been struggling with depression for a long time, didn't really realize it, but what do I do about it? And that's where it can help to go to a therapist, or to go to an energy healer, or someone who can help guide you and can help you identify the roots of what's going on. One other thing, I just want to kind of go backwards and touch on something else you said, was that, you know, some people just will never be open to doing the work, whatever the work looks like for them. I know I've had people talk to me and tell me, you know, I don't really want to start, because once I start, I think there's just too much there to even, you know, to even start. So I'm not going to even bother.
Yeah.
With that, I will say this, and I've experienced this personally. I have seen clients experience this, is this. We, okay, how do I word this? We are afraid of and hesitant of the unknown. Okay, so if you start any type of a healing journey, or therapy, or whatever, anything that's new to you, even if you know that it's going to benefit you, it's going to help you in the long run, it's still this aspect of the unknown. And so that's scary. So we are creatures who love to be comfortable. We love our comfort zones. So to step past those edges of our comfort zones, to try things that we are uncomfortable with, that's a hard thing to do. And again, whatever that might look like for you, to go to therapy, to for me, something I would be uncomfortable with is going to work to a gym to work out. That's an edge that I'm just not comfortable pushing past that, right? So it literally applies to all areas of life as well, not just mental health or healing or helping yourself, right? So keep that in mind. And we all have an ego, okay? So that's that voice in your head that's going to criticize you, it's going to judge you, it's going to tell you, why would you even bother? Like you'll never be able to feel better, so don't even start. And that our ego is really what loves that comfort. And when you first are starting on any type of self-improvement, working on your mental health, whatever it might be, going to the gym, right, or exercising, working out, eating healthy, your ego is going to be the one that's going to try to stop you. And the thing is, I'll try not to get too deep into this, but I think it's something that people need to be aware of. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not your feelings. So if you can identify that voice in your head, right, that ego voice that's going to try to stop you, or it's going to judge you, if you can start to identify that and separate yourself from that, that's a really important step, a really important aspect of this whole thing. Because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, when I was feeling really, really depressed years and years ago, and I would tell myself I was invalidating my own experience and my own feelings, that's ego, right? That's ego that is telling me, like, your problems aren't special. So many other people have it way worse than you. Like, don't speak up about this, because your problems aren't worth it, right? That's an example of what the ego sounds like. And I think that the ego is a big part as well of people who struggle with anxiety, because, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't really struggle with anxiety. You know, you have this voice in your head that's like telling you all of like the worst case scenarios, you know, and that's not actually you. Like, you as your true self aren't the one who's who's telling yourself those stories. They're just rattling around in your head. They don't have any solid foundation or basis, right? And I think that a big part of that is the ego, is that voice that's not actually yours. It sounds like yours, but it's not really actually yours. Does that like resonate kind of?
Oh yeah. Like
Yeah.
I've learned a lot about the ego, like just from you and reading books and stuff. And that's totally anxiety, right? Your ego is always so loud. Like why, like realistically, why would people just hate me for no reason? Why would people who don't know me hate me?
Yeah.
You've never met me. Why, like,
Yeah.
why would you think that? That's just your ego. And like another example is like, if you're struggling with mental health or anything like that, why
Stacey,
why your ego's gonna tell you like you should be happy, like you have so many reasons to be happy. Why are you depressed? Why are you upset? Why are you sad? Like
yeah.
your ego is gonna say that, right? And
Yeah.
it's not true. It's just, it's very loud, right?
It is very loud.
But I think what you're saying as far as the ego goes, I think it's bang on, because you play so many scenarios in your head that never ever happen or never come to be, or, oh, I'm upset about this, and if someone has this reaction to me, it makes it worse. It makes me more upset, or it makes me cry, or it makes me, and that's where your anxiety comes from, because it's like, I don't want to have a conversation because this is the way it's going to play out, and I'm scared to do that, or I'm going to be too upset about that. So
It's
a
your,
lot of
it's
it,
your, you're protecting yourself by doing that, right? It's a
yeah,
defense mechanism of, well, and I know you and I, Mom, we both, like, if we have to have an important conversation, we'll just play it in our heads, and then you too, and then it's like you just think of like the worst case scenario, and like realistically that's probably not how the conversation is going to go, but then you get yourself so worked up about it that you just end up not even saying anything, right?
and then your anxiety just goes crazy high. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a lot better as I get older with my anxiety, but I've had it now that you're doing so much work, Alex, and talk about it more. It's like, well, yeah, I've been dealing with that for 30 years,
Yeah. And like, I know we talked about OCD at work the other day. That's something that both you and I struggle with. And I think anxiety and OCD goes hand in hand, right? Like I was thinking about it today. I'm like, I was driving home from Estevan. I had gone in to get groceries and I was in a rush. I was like, I need to get home. I'm always rushing to get to the next thing. And I'm like, why? Like, I literally don't have anything to do when I get home. Why am I so anxious to get there? And I feel like that's just a cycle that I'm constantly going through is I'm always just like waiting for the next thing. I have such a hard time just being in the moment and like enjoying life. Like very rarely am I just in the moment, right? Like right now, I'm thinking about what I need to do after this, right? And I think that's a really common thing. I think a lot of people deal with that, but yeah, I think OCD is another big thing that goes hand in hand with anxiety. Like I know for you, Mom, it's making lists and how like you don't feel complete until you finish that list, right? Like it's like a thing in your mind that's like, well, I don't, yeah, like you struggle with it, right? I know that's
Yeah.
something that you've said you struggle with.
Yep. Big
And
time.
so that's the thing too, is where that voice of anxiety, I think, comes in. And like I said, I don't really struggle with that, so I can't speak to it personally, but just from observing like you, Alex, and just hearing you guys talk about this, is that it's always, it's this like underlying current of like fear. So if you don't complete your list, what's going to happen? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, all my windows aren't going to get cleaned.
okay, so
I know.
so this is
And
what I've
actually,
really started to practice for myself. Sorry to interrupt you, but It's
I'll
like,
be right back.
because,
Just hold
okay,
on.
because
You guys continue.
I've really gotten into the habit of like, and I never used to be this way, but I've really gotten into this thing where it's like, okay, like I know I need to get this done and this done and this done and get this cleaning done and da 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 da. And I find I have a hard time relaxing until I get those things done. Or I have it in my mind, I don't really deserve to relax until the house is clean, until all I have my client sessions complete and this. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. So what I've been kind of trying to do just to be more present, and it is just like ask myself, well, like why? Like what, okay, what'll happen if the windows don't get clean? Well, it's just going to be me who's maybe like a little bit annoyed, or it's in the back of my mind that the windows aren't clean, right? Like it's this is where the awareness starts to come into play, where if you can catch yourself in those thoughts or be like in those moments of, okay, this is what I'm thinking and this is how I'm feeling, and then just asking yourself those questions and almost having that back and forth with yourself of, why do I feel anxious about this? Or even asking yourself, but doing it this in more of like a playful kind of way of, well, what's the worst case scenario? And I'm going to use your example, Mom, of if the windows don't get washed. Like there's maybe not really a worst case scenario. It's just the windows will be dirty. Do you know what I mean? So we
Yeah,
get
but
into
I
these
think,
patterns and these mind things of like, we're just always in this high state of anxiety or just like irritation or annoyance with ourselves or what's going on around us, that it's hard to come into that, just like being present and being okay with the house not being clean, or with your list not being complete or whatever.
but I think that's where the ego comes in too, is because, and I know you guys know, the way I was raised, things should be perfect and things should be, and for me, if someone comes to my house and they see, and we've talked about this before, people don't come into your house if it's clean and say, oh, your house is so clean. They don't really notice it. But if you walk into somebody's house who is not clean and is dirty and messy, and you're going to notice that more than you would if somebody's house is clean.
Right.
And that plays into the ego, that plays into the way I was raised, that plays into the anxiety, and
Yeah.
how, for me, making a list takes away my anxiety because it's not running through my head all the time. And then I am trying, like right today, I got some windows clean, but I'm not going to clean all of them. I just got to do some in the house because I know it's going to be there again in the spring to do all over again. But
Yeah.
I am trying to get to that point where it's okay just to let go, but it's really hard.
Yeah, it
It's
is
so
hard.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like I said, Alex, just as you were stepping away, I never used to be like this, but I've gotten to the point now where it's like, okay, I know I need to clean the floors, but I need to dust first so that the dust and the dirt falls onto the floor before I clean the floor. And then I should wash the bedding too, because the dogs were on the bed and there's dirt and mud on the bed. And so then I can zhush all that onto the floor. And then I should wash the bath mats too from the bathroom, but then I should clean the whole bathroom. It's just like,
Boy, I taught
so,
you girls well.
and it's
Oh,
just with stuff like that where I'm just like, okay. And our house now is a lot bigger than our old house, or any house really that I've ever lived in. So it's a lot bigger to clean, which is not a big deal. It just takes longer, it takes more energy, right? So I'm trying to, I love it when the whole house has been cleaned all in one day, but I'm trying to let go, where I'm like, okay, today I'll clean the bathroom, tomorrow then I'll do the floors, then I'll, whatever. So again, it's just that present mindful practice of setting that ego voice aside, and you get to be in the driver's seat of, okay, let's just let this one go for today. right? And then every time you do that, and the more you do that, the more you practice that, the more present you can become. I saw a TikTok today where today or yesterday, where someone had asked a girl a question about tools or practices for being more present. And I didn't watch her whole response, but she talked about, well, you're not going to like me for this one, but you know, when you're in the grocery store, choose the longest line to stand in. Or you know, she had a bunch of ones where you're putting yourself in these positions or these situations where you're having to be present with yourself. So in the long line in the grocery store, you're going to have to wait maybe an extra 5 or 10 minutes, but what better time to be present, right? Because you don't have anything else to do, you don't have anywhere else to go. So it's even the little things like that, where or you know, taking an hour off your phone in the evening. And something I've been practicing is, if we're watching a movie, I'll watch the movie and I won't sit on my phone the whole time. So yeah, again, those little things. And every time you make a choice out of conscious presence, you're shushing that ego to the back seat. And then the more you do that, the more your ego learns, okay, I don't get to be in control anymore, right? And then, you know, I what I have learned within the past year or couple of years is that we don't have to work against our ego. You can essentially befriend your ego. And one thing I learned through my own meditation realizations last year was our ego just wants to survive, right? It's just concerned with survival. Well, what does the ego love? It loves comfort. So anytime, again, right, we come back to this topic of comfort. Anytime you're doing something that's new or different, and again, that applies to anything, not just mental health, not just personal growth, but it applies to everything. When anytime you're doing something new, your ego feels threatened, right? And so in meditation one day last year, I had a conversation with my ego and I sat down and I said, look, I know that we've been doing things a certain way up until this point, but this isn't working anymore. And it's going to be okay. And we're going to make these changes and we'll both survive together. So even just different ways of looking at things and working with things that way can make a big difference. And again, as I mentioned earlier, excuse me, I think with the ego being so intertwined with, you know, mental health, anxiety, like you guys were talking about, OCD, all of those different things. I think it's really important to just keep that in mind, that voice in your head is really actually usually not you. And that's, I think, a good starting point as well for people who are maybe newer to this, is that literally when I learned that, it like picked my world up and turned it and set it back down. Because up until that point, I had no idea that I wasn't my thoughts, my emotions, my depression. I thought that that's who I was, and that was intrinsically just a part of me. And when I read a book and it talked about this, and it talked about the ego and how you're not that voice in your head, you're actually the one who's observing and hearing that voice in your head. So thinking of things from that perspective, I personally think can help a lot. It's a lot to kind of wrap your mind around, maybe, if you're newer to this, but something to consider anyway.
This book. Is this the one you're talking about?
That's not the one I'm talking about, but that one is really good. And that one is really good for more like beginner kind of. And that's not to like insult or offend or anything. When I dove in, the books I was reading were like really, really heavy. That one, Shit Your Ego Says, is so good. And I think
for a lot of people,
go ahead.
I think for a lot of people, people don't know what the ego is, right? Like, I didn't know about it until you taught me about it.
Yeah.
And I think this book is really good at just teaching you about it and, you know, like
in an easily
aware
digestible
of it.
way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a really easy read.
Yeah, it's light. It's not like, super heavy. I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle quite a few years ago now. And it was like, that was like right around my awakening. And it was a lot. Like I'd have to read a little bit and then just sit and take time to actually like digest all of that information. Yeah, so that's a really good book recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I have pretty much talked about everything I wanted to talk about. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about? Questions, comments, anything else you want to mention, Alex?
Yeah, I guess I just think it's really important for people to know that, like, if they're going through something, you're not alone. Like, you're gonna feel like you're alone. You're gonna feel like nobody can relate to you, but you're not. Like, you're not alone.
Yeah.
That's really what I'd like to end it with. It's just, and I mean, I'm always here if you need anybody to talk to. I know I say that, and it's really hard to reach out to people that you maybe don't necessarily feel comfortable reaching out to, but I will never judge you. I know how it feels to struggle, and I know same with you, right? Like
Yeah.
your message box is always open, and
Yeah,
yeah,
100%. And it's always been open. And that's why I started talking about my journey with depression years and years and years ago. And I have always made sure to tell people, I'm here if you just need an ear. I'm here if you're looking for guidance or support, if you just need to vent or rant about things. I'm here. And like you said, Alex, I know it can be hard to reach out to people if you don't really know them personally or you're not friends with them or whatever. But I do actually think that sometimes some people are more comfortable that way. So I know, like, I've had people who, have said once I started getting into energy work, they were a little bit not like weary, but they were uncomfortable maybe with coming to me for sessions because they knew me personally. So sometimes it is easier to talk to someone or to go to turn to someone who doesn't know you. And I will be the last person to ever judge you or anything of the sort. Alex, I know you too. This is a safe space. I personally love holding space for others. I love holding little containers of space, even like this, where it's just like a casual conversation, but we can teach and we can talk and we can learn from each other. I think it's really special and important to create these little pockets and these little containers where we can come and be together and we can be open and vulnerable, because I think that things are starting to change. The tables are starting to turn a little bit where people are getting a little bit more comfortable in their vulnerability. But I know that it is still a very new thing, and some people really aren't okay with being vulnerable. That's okay too. And I talked about this a few years ago, I remember, because I have been so open for so long about my story, but it's okay if you don't want to open up. So it's okay, for example, if we host another chat in a month, say another mental health chat where we come on and you join us live, you can just sit. You can sit and listen. You don't have to ask questions. You don't have to put your face on the screen. You don't have to do any of that. You can just come and be in this space and know that it's a safe space. And then maybe in a few months, you'll be comfortable with opening up or sharing or asking a question, right? And again, there's no judgment if you don't want to share, because I know that sharing isn't for everyone. I just personally know that that's part of my reason for this life and this lifetime, is to share. Also in human design, I don't know if you guys have heard of human design, but I'm a generator. Generators are here to share and to share their stories and their vulnerabilities. So yes, I'm always here. My inbox is always open. I'm always open for sessions. If you're looking for deeper help and guidance, Alex can attest to the changes that are possible if you're willing to put the work in. One other thing I just want to mention, I know we've been here for an hour and a half, but I just want to say to be gentle with yourself. What? I just missed what happened.
I didn't realize it had been an hour and a half either.
Yeah, it's been an hour and a half. To just be gentle with yourself, no matter kind of what you're struggling with or what you're going through, because it's so easy again to fall into that ego trap of being, I'm not doing enough, I'm not working hard enough to help myself feel better, right? And we create these, or our ego creates these stories that we then just wallow in. So be patient, be gentle. Any kind of change or a long-term helping yourself is going to take some time. So it's not about, I used to get so frustrated and pissed off when, I would do like a week of journaling or a week or like a few days of something and like nothing would change. Well, I've been putting in this work for almost 2 years now, and a lot has changed, but it's taken a long time, right? So it's not generally going to be an overnight thing. Again, whatever this looks like for you, whether it's my type of self-healing where you're going into that inner child, into those inner wounds, maybe it's changing your diet or eating healthy, maybe it's exercising or going to the gym or like whatever. It doesn't only apply to mental health. I know that's why we're here to talk, but it applies to everything. Be gentle, be patient, and give yourself the space and the compassion and the grace to understand that you're a human who is struggling and going through something, and you do have inner wounds. I'm sorry to tell you, but you do. You have a wounded inner child. You have these things that have been subconscious for so long. You have things that you're not aware of. You have even habits and patterns that you don't realize that you're doing. And so it takes a long time to peel those layers away. And you're going to work on the same things over and over and over again, because each time you peel a layer, you are looking at that wound, or you're looking at that thing from now a higher consciousness, a higher state of being, where you're seeing things through a new lens of perception. You're seeing things in a new way. So it's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to want to quit. It's hard to keep going. Alex can attest to that too, and I can too. It's really, really hard to keep.
There's a lot of tears
going.
involved.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. So I think we'll wrap things up and leave it at that. If you have any questions about anything we talked about tonight, if you want more specific tools or anything like that, you can message me or email me. If you want to personally talk with Alex, you, I'm sure, can message her. I'm going to upload this to YouTube, so I'll put both of our contact information in the description. You can get a hold of both of us. I would love to do another one of these in like a month or so. If you're up for that, Alex, and maybe we can kind of make it an ongoing thing, or we could maybe have like a certain topic every month, kind of within the umbrella of mental health or whatever. We'll talk about it and we'll work it out. But yeah, we're here. If anyone
Mom, do you have any questions?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Okay. I see Stacy's in here. I don't know if she has any questions, wants to type anything. No.
There is a chat box too. And Stacy knows she can always text me or whatever. Yeah, so I think that's it. I'll leave it at that.
There is one more thing I want to say. Okay. I just want to close with this, and this is kind of like totally off topic, but it's something that kind of popped up in my meditation the other day to bring up during this, and it's yeah, it's not really related to any of this, but
Okay, go for it.
I feel like it's not hard to just be kind to someone. Like, it's not hard to just give a compliment. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't good at receiving compliments. I know I'm not. But I mean, it's not that, like, you can give one person a compliment and that can make their entire day. And just try to be a more kind human. Everybody needs that, especially right now in the world. You know, so much division is being caused. I just feel like it's not that hard to just be nice.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And what actually popped up was ask someone in your life, what is something that you wish someone would ask you about? Like, something that they're very interested in, that you wish that someone would ask you about it so that you could talk about it. Like, I know for Kyle, he really likes to talk about sports. So it's also not that hard to just, you know, ask someone something that you know that they're interested about, something you know lights them up and they want to talk about. And that was just the main thing that came up was, and I was actually going to text you and ask you, like, what's something that you just wish somebody would ask you about that you want to talk about, right? That
Yeah,
you just want to bring up in conversation at any time. I didn't want to text it to you because I wanted to bring it up now, but I don't know. I think that's just a cool thing to think about.
I love that. And you know what? I feel like right now, so much of our lives and our conversations revolve around COVID and just things that are happening in the world right now, that I think it would be such a delight to talk about things not having anything to do with that. And I
Yeah,
feel
and
really
maybe that's
sad
kind of why
saying that. Yeah, I love that, because I know that there are lots of things that I love to talk about. I could have gone on for probably 5 hours tonight about different things. And yeah, you're right. I think it's really important to show an interest in the people in our lives and make an effort to, even if you're not interested in what they're interested in, to be open with them and just hold that space for them to be excited and to be joyful about something, and to allow them to be lit up and to allow them to express that excitement. Because I know personally, even though there are many things I would love to talk about, and again, I have no trouble coming on something like this and talking about it, but in person, I really do struggle to talk about a lot of things, or I feel silly, or I feel like maybe they're not really actually interested. And that's fine if they aren't. But if they are genuinely trying to have a conversation, or, you know, ask me about energy or healing or something like that, and they actually want to learn and they're actually open to that, yeah, like that's the kind of shit that I live for. So I love that. And you're right. Kindness doesn't cost anything. I know personally, I always try to be very friendly and upbeat with like cashiers, or just use your manners, even like, thank you, please, right? That can go such a long way in someone's day. And just showing that gratitude, even with Scott, my partner, and I, you know, if he does the dishes, say thank you. Cook supper, say thank you, right? Like, it's I think that's such an important part of just being a human. Is I feel like so many things have just gone to shit that even the simplest things can make a big difference.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I love that you brought that up. All right, let's wrap things up, and we will chit chat about our next chat, and we will get that set up for next time. So thank you for those of you who were here live. Thank you if you're watching in the future. Again, you can send donations or whatever, but it's definitely not required.
Oh, you just froze.
Oh, sorry. Okay, that's a sign that it's time to end things. So love you guys, and we'll see you
Love
next time.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.